what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business. Not because they want to do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shit.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, this is part 2. Now, if you guys didn't get a chance, the last video I posted up was about cleaning the reputation of a facility. So basically, a facility that was just kind of plagued with maybe some rogueness, some unprofessionalism, and then now your management coming in and you got to kind of gain that respect that the public needs. But we also mentioned that you also got to make sure that the front line also has some trust, the people that have been doing their job honestly and professionally. And that was a great dialogue. We touched on employee morale, trust, a bunch of stuff. So please check out that episode first before you check out this, because this episode is going to be dialogue 2, and we're going to be a little bit more specific. So we're going to focus on some specific actions and maybe the reasons why these things occur, not to justify or minimize, but, you know, it's good to know the reasons, right? So if you know the reasons, you can find ways to kind of really get solutions that really, you know, right down to the foundation. But now the show that we're talking about today right now is going to be about when you kind of taking over a facility that may have a history of corruption, whether it's excessive use of force, contraband, fooling around with inmates where you know you shouldn't be doing. And if you're coming in a high level, so you're coming in at that higher level management, you know, what you may need to do to, one, get, again, same thing, get that trust from the public, which is usually that immediate trust. But you're also looking for longevity, which deals with that employee morale and making sure that the good staff who should be involved in the plans that you're making have some trust in what you're implementing. But the difference between yesterday's episode and today is we're going to be talking about specifics now. This is more than just employee morale. This is just basically specific things you need to do to deter if you have rogue. You know, if you have some rogue officers or some rogue staff. You know, again, got to have that positive image, got to have an image that the public can trust. So what I did was I brought some frontline professionals who obviously have secured supervisory positions. We definitely know Russ Hamilton, the founder of Keepers of Chaos on Facebook. What's up, Russ?
Hey, Anthony. How's it going? Glad to be here tonight. I think it'll be an interesting discussion. I hope somebody learned something from it.
Hey, Russ, how's that group going on Facebook?
You know what? I'm coming to just, you know, enjoy it more every day. We've got, you know, just a crazy amount of great officers there. Everyone's, you know, very involved, very engaged, you know, just trying to bring, you know, all of the knowledge and expertise and experience to bear for people that want to listen to it, who want to make themselves better officers, and who want to be involved at a professional level in a professional forum.
I love that, guys. If you're on Facebook, great group to check out. They got mentoring, they got a bunch of stuff, but a very good community. Keepers of Chaos, and that's KAOS. So again, Russ, great job on what you're doing there. I love being part of that great community. We also have a fellow YouTuber and an influencer. Name is David Smith. He has a channel called Correctional Officers Lifestyle. He's been on my channel a few times before. Dave, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Man, I'm doing great, Anthony. It's I'm glad you invited me into this one. It sounds like it's going to be a good discussion, and I certainly hope that people take something positive away from it. I really do. I think it'll be a good topic.
Yes, and thanks for coming on. I know it was kind of last minute. I'm actually doing this for a friend. But I think it's going to be a very good discussion. It's constructive, so we're going to see where the dialogue goes. That's the great thing about what we do. We're not prepared, but we have enough knowledge to just kind of just get a good flow. And I think together, let's see, I got 18 years. Russ, how many years did you have in the system, Russ? Now, remember, you're on mute, Russ. I knew he's going to forget. There it is.
All right, 20. I have basically 29 and some change.
All right, let's round it off to 30. So you're 30 plus my 18 is 48. Hey, Dave, what do you got?
I'm working on 27.
27. So let's see. Let's round that off to 30. Hear me out. So that's 40. That's 70. But we'll take away 3. That's 75. I hope I'm right. So 75 years of experience that's going to share some information, guys. So whoever's tuning in on this, Come on, guys. That's for free. That's great. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks to you, brave men and women that work in corrections. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. We're going to go to our sponsor. We come back. We're going to be talking about that next level of specific action that may be needed to build that trust and to maintain a good reputation. Stand by.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
All right, guys. Now, if you haven't, guys, Inmate Manipulation Decoded is available. Check out the link in the description. All right. So again, just real quick, I want you to know that the measures that we're going to talk about today, even though in the context is we have some rogue officers or some rogue staff that have painted a very negative image on the facility, know for a fact that the specific actions that were taken are also not just meant to protect the inmate population, but also to protect staff that want to do their job, because we want to deter bad staff, so you want management to put measures in place so you're not put in a predicament where you're next to someone who's going to do something rogue, someone who's going to go a little excessive and now you have to step up. We don't want those situations. We don't. But Russ, real quick, I want people to know that when we have shows like this, there is a balance, right? I mean, as much as there's an effort to maintain that reputation, of course, do what you can to make sure that the public knows you're doing the best for the inmate population. I would like the audience also to know that by doing that, it also helps good staff be more effective.
Oh, absolutely. But, the one thing that we always want to do is we always want to go, 1, 2, 3 levels deeper when we're looking at this stuff. Is the failure of those staff members related to the leadership or the lack of leadership of what was going on, at the admin level? We have to ask those questions. If you don't get to what the root of the problem is, you'll never be able to lead your way out of that, and you'll never be able to make and incorporate the changes that need to happen in order to bring that institution, that facility, that unit, whatever it is, back into the right groove and keep it, on that professional plane.
I love that, because that you have to always ask, why is this happening? So again, not to minimize or justify the rogues, but why is this happening? Rikers a big thing. When there's no trust in the laws that are being passed, where the officers don't feel protected, they start to take measures into their own hands. Again, not justifying what they've done, but if you're going to do a plan that has some longevity to it, you have to attack the why. Because if you don't attack the why, it's just a symptom. You're not treating the sickness. So again, hey, Dave, just from your perspective too, the changes, I watch your channel, a lot of great content. I feel that your stuff is very objective, very fair, gives very good advice. Do you feel that when it comes to fixing the reputation of a facility that, may have a few rogue officers, do you feel that by making the attempt to do what you got to do to paint that better picture, to, make sure that we're doing the job that the public trusts, that there's got to be a balance where whatever we're trying to implement also can protect the good staff that we have that's doing their job?
Well, if you're not doing anything to protect the good staff that's doing their job, you're eventually going to lose that good staff that's doing their job. I can't think of anybody that has a good set of morals that's going to willingly stand by and allow corruption to continue and still be a part of it. I can't. It doesn't exist. I don't have that mindset. I'm not going to put up with anybody that does. So I also want to agree with Russ. You've got to look at the top. You've got to look at the leadership or the lack thereof, because if that's the root cause of it, that's where it needs to be addressed at first. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, that's extremely powerful, because again, that's why what happens here is that when you have that culture in a facility that's kind of went astray, you're going to look at that management first, because it's probably only got that way because maybe there's something at the higher level that's allowing that. So now when you come in as that higher level now, and the older management has been pushed aside, there's a culture here that is literally, it's going to be hard to shift because there's a mindset. And the sad thing is that they don't know you. The staff doesn't know you coming in. So there has to be a way that even though you got to go in and have that discipline in play, because that's what the public wants. They want to see discipline. They want to see zero tolerance. You also have to remember, I'm not going to go too much into this because we did this in the last video, is that you also have to make sure that you that you get some level of trust with the staff that are going to do their job and be effective, so that universal punishment as soon as you come in may not be such a good idea, because even though the public's pushing for instant action and every little thing, even mistakes have to be 100% hammered down, well, now you're going to have effective officers who are going to be afraid to do their job and are going to be hesitant because they don't want to be swept up in that, that generalized punishment. So maybe let me get your thoughts on that. What's your thoughts on that, Russ, before we move over to the specifics?
Well, I think you're spot on there. The one thing that we really, truly do want is we want everybody, from the line staff through the administrators, to be acting in a capacity that's highly professional and should be highly respected. I think there is a real disconnect, though, between what the public expects and what the public knows. And I don't feel that the public, especially in this day and age, is being well served by the media that really is much more about, selling news time, or spots in the paper or whatever they're doing, than they are about actually covering what it means to be a correctional professional, what it means to be an inmate who's incarcerated in a place that actually is being run in a professional manner. And so I think that, sometimes we're damned if we do, damned if we don't by the public and by the media. So I don't think that we can necessarily just play to what they want, because if we just end up doing that, we're going to send so many mixed signals that we're never going to take back an institution like that. We're never going to be able to put it on the straight and narrow. We have to act, according to law, policy, procedure, and most of all, our oath.
I love that. Dave, I see you agreeing to that. What's your thoughts?
We all know that the media has a sincere love of posting bad stuff about law enforcement professionals, and that includes corrections. If we give them negative stuff to talk about, that's what they're going to talk about. If we give them positive stuff to talk about, then let them talk about that. So, yeah, we have to present a better culture for the media, because the media is the outlet where the rest of the world is going to learn what it is to be a corrections professional and to do the job that we do.
I love that, guys. And that means when you're coming in and you're coming in as a higher level management, and I know there's going to be have that zero tolerance because that's what the public wants. And again, the public really, sometimes the solutions aren't really where it needs to be because they don't have a full picture. So what they want is they want immediate action, but there's a way that you can also balance by, okay, maybe there's some few rogue officers and, I got to do what I got to do with them. But you know what? Let's start showcasing the good by if we have some officers discovering contraband, some officers stopping assaults, even if it's routine stuff, you got to build that image up, put that out there, give these officers these, accommodations, whatever it is. And the reason why I'm saying that is because you got to realize something. These good officers have been connected to this negative reputation of this facility. So they're disenfranchised. They're losing a lot of their pride, but yet they're still coming in every day. So if you come in, even if it's recognizing the small things, those little steps will matter, because now these officers start building that pride again. And then I also like to say, we mentioned in the last episode, whatever changes you're going to implement, somehow you got to involve them, because if they're a part of it, they're going to want to see it succeed. Now, okay, so if you're coming in and you're new, the first thing I want to say right now is you got to get to know your staff. You got to start, right off the bat, you got to do your tours, check out all shifts, really get to see, what the culture is up front. Don't go by what the rumor mills were before you came into the facility. Don't do that. We what happened, whatever, you read it, but you're not going to get always the truth from the media. So you want to make sure that when you have a plan and you're going 100% full force, it makes sense, because what the media may throw out there, what you've read, could be very exaggerated. Not saying it didn't happen, just exaggerated. So if you go in with this generalized, I'm going to sweep all, well, the problem is you're going to knock out a lot of good in that. So the first thing I would like to say is get to know the facility, get to know the layout, get to know the people, get to know the inmates. Do what you got to do, but do some rounds and don't plan on doing anything just yet. Really get a feel for all the shifts, the staff, the layout, take your little notes and then go ahead and then come up with a game plan, but do not come up with a game plan until you have walked and really studied the facility. What's your thoughts on that, Russ, as a first step?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's where you want to start. Your base of action from is based on your observations, based on what you see, and trying to accentuate as many of the positive things as you can. The number one thing that you have to do, though, if you're going to be successful at all, is you're going to have to get those line staff and those supervisors or middle management or whoever they are along that whole, line, that chain of command. You have to get them to buy into what your vision of the facility is going to be. And if your vision of what that facility should be does not include keeping them safe, you're going to lose them right off the bat. You have to get them to buy into that. You have to, you have to promote that idea about, we're going to do searches. When staff attacks happen, we are going to refer those attacks, to the district attorney to be prosecuted. When those inmates act up, when they hit you, when they stab you, they're going to be removed. They're going to be put into segregation. We're going to investigate those things. And you have to get them to understand what your full vision is, but you especially have to get them to buy into the part about their own safety and security, because they are never going to see very much beyond that unless you help them. So if you're not going to help them to see the rest of that vision, you'll lose them right at the outset there. So get them to buy into your vision by starting with that, their safety, their security, and what they go through and struggle with on a day-to-day basis.
And I love what you're saying, because I think when there's that pressure from the public and all you're getting is that one side of the story, your initial vision may be an isolated vision because you're only being fed one side of it. And then now Russ is right, 100%. There's another side. It's having that trust, and letting the staff know I'm here to protect you too, because I'm going to tell you something. When you have a facility that's got this negative reputation and it's got the attention of the media, inmates are going to make a lot of false allegations because they know that, hey, why not? Everybody's listening. Why not? So we need to make sure that this isn't a free-for-all for the inmates either. And when we talk about protecting staff outside of safety and security, obviously what Russ mentioned, I also want to talk about the allegations that are going to be false that are going to come now because there's attention coming their way. So, that's where you want to have that investigative division that literally is doing their job, investigating, giving you some really good results, either yes or no, not results that are, well, there's not enough evidence either way. Nope. I want either a yes or no. And if it turns out that the officer didn't do it, and you prove that that the officer didn't do it, I want something out there that lets the inmate know, maybe a charge or something, so this doesn't count as, well, this officer had 20 allegations on them. They all were proven to be that person, the inmate that said it, was proven to have lied. They were proven to be unfounded. Because the problem is right now, again, when a facility goes through this negative reputation and kind of like an open free-for-all now, these inmates are going to go for what they can and just keep on making these allegations. And the poor officers that are good, that do what they're supposed to do, especially if they're doing their job and they're on a unit and those inmates want that officer out because they're effective. Well, this officer who has every reason to have their chest out high, we're not protecting them from the false allegation. We're not. Investigate it, find out the truth. And if the inmate has been proven to lie, something as simple as, well, the inmate said this happened on a Tuesday, but the officer didn't work on a Tuesday. Lie, discipline, whatever it's got to be. Set the standard that you cannot make a false allegation. And then I think the officers will begin to respect that. Even though they know you're cleaning out the cancer, and that's good with good officers. They want that cancer cleaned out. They don't want to die. They want that cancer cleaned out. But now look what else you're also doing. This officer's a good officer. You're not attacking them. You start standing up for them. What's your thoughts on that, Dave? I mean, you're a supervisor. I mean, is that what you tend to do?
Well, I am in a unique position in my supervisory role in that I am the relief captain at my institution. So I do get to see all 4 shifts. And yeah, if you have inmates making false allegations and you don't step up and protect that staff, then they're going to get a why do we even bother attitude. So you want to step up, you want to protect your staff from the false allegations. But a lot of times when you're talking about rogue officers, as we're talking about in this, you have to also protect your good staff from allegations from the rogue officers at times, which it pains me greatly to say that. I don't like having to say that, but it's true. You're going to get allegations from the rogue officers that want the good officers gone just much as the inmates do. And like I said, I hate saying that, but I had to.
No, can I tell you something? I'm glad you did, because we're all professionals that watch this channel, and we obviously know they're there. But the reason why we're having this dialogue, guys, is because the dialogue is to protect the professionals that follow this channel. So, there's a purpose behind here. But I know Russ has to say something because he hit the mic. Russ, what's your thoughts on what we were just saying?
Well, no, it just goes back to the whole thing, the whole spectrum of what we're talking about in this institution, and being in the midst of trying to take it back. You can't countenance the rogue officers and stuff, but you know what? But there's also a point at which you either have to cut them off or find a way to bring them back into the fold. And part of that is looking at the circumstances that they've been operating under. I mean, when you're put in a position day in and day out where you're in danger and no one has your back, and things start to get to the point where you're kind of doing things that are a little bit on the sketchy side, is that completely your fault? Do we not all have a human nature that reacts to the fear that we have to face day by day? And then after a while, what kind of stress does that put on you? We all know what our stress levels are. We have the highest damn suicide rates in the whole world. Why is that? And I think part of it is just, individuals being placed in situations like that. So we do need to look at this, from that perspective and not tolerate that stuff. But at the same time, we have to figure out what the true cause of it is.
What's great about that too is sometimes you could have an officer that's involved in an incident, but if you look at their history, they could have had a perfect history. Maybe somewhere along the line, something happened. So it's really good to understand the wellness of our employees. I was actually thinking so much as, maybe every 2 years we have a mandated, psych or eval or something, just, to kind of keep these, if the officers have concerns, we're getting them. And I'm not expecting the officers to come to us. That's why, because I don't think they will. But guys, when I'm saying to implement this, I want to implement it because we care. Because, you have officers that may have passed the psych test at the beginning of their career, but in the course of 25 years, they have seen things, they have done things. I mean, it's just so much has changed. And we tend to just kind of like a crock pot, put them in the profession and then forget about them for 25 years. No, I think what we should do now, especially at a facility like this, is let's get some mandated every 2 years. Let's, make sure that, we have someone on site that can talk to them. And if there's any concerns, we're there to help. An honest attempt to help and not to judge. That's the key. We're not doing this to judge. We're doing this to help. So that I think would carry a long way. What's your thoughts on that mandated meeting with psych every 2 years, Dave?
There we go. I got it. Sorry, I was having technical difficulties. The meeting with psych every other year would be a great thing. I think it would go a long way to alleviating the situation that Russ specifically brought up, where you're trying to change a culture from one where the officers are forced to do what they have to do to survive. And I think it would be good to get the psych evaluations as you're transitioning to the new way of doing things, to make sure that it's effective, to make sure that the staff feel protected and to make sure that your mission's going in the right direction. So yeah, I'm on board with that.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I just want to mention, guys, is first thing, after you start understanding the layout, start talking to the people and really just starting getting some information to start building a game plan that molds with the vision. Now, by the way, guys, you may have a vision, but make the vision malleable. You know what I mean? Because it may change as you maneuver through the facility and, just see if there's a way to balance it. But again, when you figured you grabbed what you needed, now it's a matter of, okay, so what do we do to not just react, because that's not where we're at right now. It's about preventing. That's the key. So preventing and deterring. So the first thing I'm always thinking of when I'm touring a facility and I'm looking for safety and security, I guess this is always in the back of my mind, plus being that PREA person that I am, the first thing I go to are cameras. I know this may, to me, cameras deter, but they show the truth. I'm always looking at cameras in almost every hidden spot. And again, my perspective is usually for the safety of the officers 100%. But now that I'm going in on this level and I'm just trying to be empathetic and playing the role of a person that's got to clean this facility out, I'm looking at it from another perspective as well. Where are my cameras? Am I covering the dark spots? And guys, I'm not looking at sweating little things. It's not what these cameras are in play for. I'm not. I'm looking for actually where can my greatest concerns be? I mean, I know this is crazy too, but with PREA and stuff like that, you do have to be careful with the cameras. You got to make sure that you don't have them over areas where inmates are changing or using the bathroom. I get that. But I have done, I have been thinking of things, even just putting cameras in closets, because sometimes you have these wild allegations, and the thing is, sometimes these cameras, if they're employed correctly, not only will they get rid of a rogue staff member, but guess what else they'll do? They'll get rid of a foolish allegation, an allegation where inmate's going to try to make up some shit, and then you're like, nope, go to the camera, and that camera now has evidence that you need to go ahead and bring an unfounded result to that allegation. But Russ, you're big on safety and security. Would that be one of the first things you check, is the cameras?
Well, cameras are definitely, part of what can be the solution, and can be used to, hopefully, mitigate problems that might happen and stuff. One of the issues with camera that's always going to be in the back of minds of staff, though, are is it going to be used for some petty things over some petty issues and things like that. And the other part about the camera is, although the camera captures what happened, it doesn't capture anything about what the officer's perception of what was going on at that moment in time happens. And like it or not, human perception is extremely flawed. Any of you that want to go out and Google about, the number of passes between basketballs while a gorilla is walking back and forth in the background knows that to be the case. We get hyper-focused on the danger at the time. And I had this happen to a good friend of mine where he was charged because there was a camera that captured something that he didn't report, even though he was in the middle of fighting for his life. And so they tried to fire him over it. Well, that's not the way you lead people. That's, you got to understand what cameras can do and what cameras can't do. Camera can't tell you what that officer's perception of what was going on at the time, what he caught out of the corner of his eye, what was right in front of him. It doesn't tell you all that. And it gives a jaundiced perspective from an angle that the officer was never in to begin with. So I think we have to, have a realistic policy. And I think those things need to be addressed. And one of the things that I worry about are that there are administrators out there that don't ever even think of those things. They're completely clueless as to, how those things work, how human perception and cameras and angles and all that goes on. Having said that, I think that a camera, though, is a great tool. I wish that we'd had body cameras back when I was working, because if we'd had that, I could have cut years off the training of some of those new boots just by saying, hey, here's what I saw, here's how I saw it, and here's how I knew that was going to happen. and just things like that, or just to show them, you know, how you can read an inmate when he's lying, how you can read their body language. Here's what happened in the riot that day. I think that it could be an invaluable training tool. So there's good and there's bad. Let's accentuate the good and try and weed the bad parts of that out. But overall, yes, cameras, absolutely.
Yeah, I like what you're saying real quick. The cameras are not meant to harass your staff. I mean, if you're looking at the cameras, there should be a reason. I know some people will tend to just want to look at the cameras and just because I don't like this guy and I'm going to catch him doing something. But if you don't really have a reason why you're looking at that camera, you know, you're going to have to justify that eventually if you just keep on coming after that person and that's all you're doing all day. There should be a reason, a motivation. And then whatever you catch on that camera at that point, hey, it is what it is. But the point is that you need to have a motivation as to, well, you know, this is what we believe happened. And maybe if you saw something prior to what you were looking for, then it makes sense. But if you're constantly using the cameras to harass and just kind of go after that one person, yeah, that's not what the cameras are for, guys. Because while you're so focused on the one person, there's other shit happening that you're not paying attention to. And Russ did mention body cams. To be honest with you, I'm actually a fan of it. And the reason why is because I feel in our facilities, inmates say a lot of false allegations that are kind of stuff that's hard not to prove. Like, you know, like how you spoke to them or something like that. So those cameras, when those body cameras are on and they have audio, and every time you have that interaction, you hit that button, you know, that's going to stop a lot of that verbal bullshit that they try to say, especially with, you know, PREA. Sometimes inmates, they look to motivate moves and they'll be like, well, that officer said this, this, and this. Not a problem. We got a body camera. Let's hear what he says. Let's hear the audio. And the audio doesn't have it. Guess what happens to that inmate who made that false allegation? They get charged. What's your thoughts on body cams, Dave?
I honestly wish we had body cams at my facility. That's not something we've implemented yet. We did, however, we do have audio in the secure housing unit, confinement units. So that's similar to what you're saying. That's helped out. But body cameras, man, I'm a fan. I'm a fan. I'm hoping we get them soon. I want them. I want them simply because of what you said. It disproves a false allegation immediately. Inmate said you said this. Camera didn't catch it. Camera doesn't lie. Camera doesn't have the capability of lying. So I'm a fan.
Yeah, and I love what Dave's saying too, guys, because management sometimes sees the benefit of the body cams more than the front line does. But that's because management's looking at the liability. And I believe they're looking to protect the officers or staff from those false allegations, because we don't want to be running amok, especially with those false PREA allegations. So we would love to be able to lean on those cameras as some evidence so we can support putting the officer back on their post. When the lawyers come, they say, well, why was the officer back on the post? Because we have the body cam footage. We have the audio. Everything that inmate said, proven to be a lie. So I'm comfortable. I'm 100% confident in putting that officer back in that position. And again, the officer on the front line should understand why that would help them more than it would hurt them. Hey, Russ, before we go to the next part, I wanted to mention something, though. I'm sure you probably worked with some managers or some supervisors that I want to explore this real quick. The cameras where they just follow people just to harass them and then wind up just trying to go after them because they're able to see things on camera. But it's like, hey, if you don't have really a reason to check the camera, that could be counted as harassment if you're constantly going after that same person, correct? If they're not doing nothing wrong, just you have a hard on for this individual.
Yeah, regrettably, I've been involved in a couple of circumstances where that was the case, and where, you know, someone would look at something on the cam and try and blow it out of proportion because they were trying to hurt one specific sergeant that I knew and also one specific officer. And, you know, it's just ridiculous. You know, those people that were on the ground level couldn't have seen what he saw, and it was days later. And rather than try and, you know, bring them in and say, hey, we need to address this issue because there's a security problem here, tried to make it look like they were the cause of the security problem, when really it was a matter of angles and other things. So, you know, really look to what your heart is doing when you're doing something like that. Are you really trying to augment safety and security, or are you just trying to be a prick?
Yeah, you said hard on, I said prick. I don't know if I little what's it called? Sigmund Freud. If we try, yeah, I'm sorry about that, Russ. I must have left something in your head there.
Just my own internal characterization of certain people that I've worked for in the past.
I think that's the first time I heard you say prick, though. So I don't know if I, Hey, so another thing real quick is, as the higher level, when you're walking around and you're trying to figure out what's needed, you probably may want to walk around with someone from the investigative side of things, but also the highest level of custody. And here's the reason why. Check out this double approach here. For the investigative authority, hey, how can I help you investigate whatever allegations that are going to come your way? Then for the higher level of custody, mind you, we're all together working together. How can I help you get through false allegations? Because again, they're going to do their side, but I'm sure higher level custody is going to want to make sure that, well, we get a lot of complaints in this area. We know it's not to be true. Well, let's camera it up. This way, again, we're trying to do what we can to lean on an official outcome. Something that later on, when shit hits the fan, nobody can go back and utilize it, because believe it or not, guys, the outcomes that have been proven to be false will hold weight. But the outcomes that can waver, well, there wasn't enough evidence to prove or disprove. That don't mean nothing in the long run. You either give me the yes, did they do it, I'll get rid of them. Give me the no, that's great, let's write up the inmate. But if you give me something that's on the fence, I don't know what to do. If I got an officer that's been accused of doing something foolish and you come back with an investigation that is on the fence, what do I do with that officer? Universal precaution. If I put him back in and something happens, you're going to throw up that last investigation that didn't have a result. But if you did an investigation and it proved to be unfounded, well, then guess what? Now I'm able to safely and confidently, from my management position, put that officer back in, because I know that you gave me some proof that everything the inmate said was a lie, and we also protected the officer's reputation by writing up that inmate, by charging the inmate. And again, like Russ said, that builds faith. So you're coming in, changing the system, but they also seen that you're protecting that officer, that good officer, from that false allegation. So again, and I'll go with Dave first. What's your thoughts on kind of as that higher level management, giving the investigative authorities what they need to do, what they got to do, and then obviously working with custody to give them what they need?
I'm going to have to agree with you on that one. Giving the investigative authority that we've had in the past at my institution, getting that yes or no is a rather easy thing. But getting something that's on the fence, you don't know. It's a crapshoot whether or not you're going to be able to reintroduce that officer to his post assignment. And if they give you something that's on the fence and you put the guy in there and he excels, good for him. Good for him. But if you put him in there and something just like what was just investigated hits again, then egg on your face. The investigative team has basically pulled themselves out of it. So I think getting everybody together to where, what can we do to make these investigations more concrete? What do you need to make the false allegation known as a false allegation? What can we do to help you with your investigative process? I think that it's all necessary. It's all necessary.
Yeah, I love that, Dave. And also, guys, we'll pull off the use of force shred. I want you guys, I didn't overlook what Russ said at the beginning either. So the cameras deter, we know that. But let's not forget, we need laws and policies and procedures that protect staff when an inmate decides to be foolish, because we need to deter that. So if I get an inmate that, let's say, spits on me or throws fluid at me, and they're kind of like, well, who cares? Put him back here, not a big deal. And that's a problem, because that's not going to stop the next inmate from doing, or the next inmate. So what happens here is officers, and I'm not saying it's the right thing, so bear with me, but let me just get into their mindset a little bit. So maybe you guys can have an understanding of human behavior. Again, not saying it's right or wrong, but hear me out. How many times are officers going to take that before they say, no, I'm done with this shit? Let one more inmate do that to me and I'm done. Because here's an officer that trusted the system. Oh, if this inmate spits on me, all right. But I know the system's going to take care of that. I know they're going to get prosecuted. I know something's going to happen to them. But then nothing happens. Now the officer starts to lose faith. Now the officer's like, well, if no one's going to do something, I have to do it because I'm not going to be spit on every day when I come to work. So Russ was spot on with that. So make sure we have those policies in play that maintain some level of protection for the officers so they can go ahead and do what needs to be done, you know, with the hopes that if something happens to them, they're protected. Now, was that what you were getting at, Russ?
Yeah, you know, I just always want to come down on the side of staff, and you know, I know that sometimes for some administrators, it's hard for them to get into our mindset. My mindset was always that any bit of deterrence that I could provide to the inmate was going to stop me from having to, you know, get into that situation again tomorrow and the next week and the next month after that. So I wanted to make everything as decisive as possible. I always, you know, try and end it with them going to SEG or them being removed from the situation or them being removed in handcuffs, going somewhere else to where inmates understood that every situation was not just potentially a losing situation, but definitely a losing situation. And that puts it in the back of their mind that the amount of effort that they need to expend to win is not going to be enough. And so what does that save me from? That saves me from being assaulted. That saves me from being stabbed. That saves me from, you know, having to, you know, sit there and worry and be in fear during an entire shift. Now, are there some individuals that take that to the next logical extension? I'm not saying it's the right extension, but it is the logical one. Yeah, there are some individuals that are going to go there and put it to a realm that's, you know, one step too far. But why is that? That's because of the situation they're being put in, where they're being micromanaged and you know, everything's being investigated and they can't seem to make any inroads on actual safety and security. If you give people the ability to make actual inroads on actual safety and actual security, all of those problems will go away for the most part, right? But when you fail to back them up and they feel like they're on their own and it's up to them and they're the Lone Ranger in every situation, you know, bad news, Kimasabi.
Right. And now, hey, Dave, obviously another thing real quick before we leave use of force, there's probably a few things, but just put some stuff out there, is obviously you got to have retraining every year on use of force. And if you do have a facility that's kind of rogue with it, then maybe you should do the training twice a year. I don't know what your facility mandates, but double it up and, you know, make sure that one thing is the reason why you're having the training from a management level is liability. We know that. You know, basically, if something happens, I can say, well, I got the person trained, and that pushes the responsibility back on the individual that went rogue. We got that. But we also have to have some level of understanding as to when these tools need to be employed. The funny thing about corrections, guys, is we're a little different than police. We don't always have the best tools to employ. So our best tool is our mouth. We communicate. We don't go right for our weapons. We communicate. That to me has been a skill that's helped me in many situations, but I think that would help a lot of law enforcement out there too, because we don't go right for a gun. We don't have a gun, you know, and some of us don't have batons or anything to protect themselves. So they really rely on their art of communicating. So I definitely think, and I have to say it, guys, besides the training of the use of force, you know, we want to kind of make sure we're weeding out the officers that tend to be aggressive, that go right for, you know, those tools, especially if they don't have to right away. If there's a chance for them to communicate, if the inmate's not in their space, if the inmate doesn't pose a threat. The last thing I want to see sometimes, guys, is when you have an officer and an inmate kind of going back and forth, and you can see that the inmate may not be compliant. I used to tell officers, listen, if you're still at a safe distance, don't approach the inmate on your own. You know, get your team if need be, do what you got to do, but don't start going into their space, because protect yourself. If this person's not a threat to you at that moment, call for backup, call for the supervisor. You know, do what you got to do, and then you put that double hand approach, keep things professional. Because at the end, if you go down on your own, it's going to wind up being a fight. You know, take advantage of the backup that you have, but the art of communication, the art of de-escalating is key, but only if you're able to do it. Me and Russ covered that before, only if it can be employed. But that's where your experience comes in. You're going to know, okay, well, I have a chance now to talk this person down. Sometimes you don't have that chance, and I understand that. Go right to what you got to do and protect yourself. I understand that. But sometimes we let the inmate get to us, and then when you're watching it on video, you see the officers chasing the inmate. The inmate's walking back into their cell, and the officer's chasing the inmate. Guys, time and place. If the inmate's walking back to their cell, let them walk back. We'll approach it later with a supervisor or somebody else and deal with the inmate in a one-on-one. But having said that, we have to kind of weed out aggression. We have to remember we have to make professional. We're held to a higher standard. And I think in my mind, a chance to kind of, if you can, work on that communication skill, work on de-escalation. It carries a long weight as long as you're able to do it. I'd like to get both your thoughts on that. So I'll go with Dave first and then Russ.
When it comes to what you're talking about an officer getting into his feels, is what I refer to it as, and wanting to jump immediately into a potentially dangerous situation, I teach my staff, if you have the option, pick your battlefield. If you can pull that inmate away from his audience, away from the rest of the population, do so. If you have a cell that inmate lives in and you can shut the door and walk off, get your back up, and more important than that, get your head back on straight, do that. We teach in Florida that use of force is the last resort after a reasonable officer has exhausted all non-force alternatives. Choose your battlefield. Choose the way you want to approach this inmate. A lot of times, if you remove the inmate from his surroundings, you've already de-escalated the situation out of a use of force. And that is one of the things that I preach with my people. Your safety is more important to me than anything. And removing that inmate from an audience is always, always, always a good idea. If you don't have that ability, then make sure you've got superior numbers as much as you can. But if you can choose your battlefield, do so. Choose your battlefield.
I love that. And Russ, what's your thoughts? I'd really like to get your thoughts because you've been on front line, CDCR. I mean, what's your thoughts on that approach?
Well, what we always want to be is we always want to be mindful of what's going on. An inmate that's, being, non-compliant in some way. Maybe it is a personal issue between him and you. Maybe it's something else. I always want to, keep that in mind because I don't want to step myself into a situation that I thought I knew what was going on. And suddenly it turns out to be something entirely different. And that's what you can run into if there's some kind of contraband in the area. Maybe you just walked in on what was going to be a stabbing incident. Had that happen before. And you do want to, try and control those things to the degree where you're always going to come out the victor. But it doesn't always work that way, right? And sometimes there's just situations that, you have to instantly act or react, and there's not time, to run it through your noggin 10 or 12 times and wonder what the best possible outcome could be. So, and that's where, training and experience really come to bear. So, the thing to really keep in mind, though, is what are your resources, right? One resource that you've almost always got is you've got that radio, right? So you let someone know right away, hey, I got an inmate over here in Charlie's section, and he's not complying with an order. Let people know where you're at. The next thing you want to do is that we used to do all the time, because I'd have inmates that weren't going to comply with a search or something like that. Well, you can't just let that go. So the first thing I would do is, I'd say, hey, Tower 8, go ahead and put the yard down. And that way, every inmate that was left standing, I knew was involved. And that gave me a chance to, pull out further or, start bringing some munitions or something to bear from somewhere else. Because then if it's just that one inmate left standing, well, you know what? Now we're going to wait a minute till I get a couple other guys here, and we're going to go get him. We're going to put him in bracelets and do what we have to do. So, be smart about what you're doing and just make sure you're making the best possible play based on what the best possible outcome should be for that situation. That's not to say it's not all going to go shitty on you, but you know, you got to try and remain in that professional realm. Sometimes that professional realm is, you know, knock down, drag out. Most of the time, or a lot of the time, it's hanging back and wait until you get sufficient resources there.
Yeah, I love that because, guys, listen, I've seen videos where you have one officer on a unit and they wind up chasing this inmate down, and it turns out that the inmate was running to get something. And then when the officer got up, the inmate got the best of the officer. You know, I love how, you know what, let's get the resources in and let's get our numbers in if needed. But again, a lieutenant always told me the best rule of thumb is, if you can, always make sure you keep that space between you and that inmate. So I'm not chasing towards you. I want to keep that space, you know. And again, even if it's for contraband, guys, I know you want to get that cell phone, you want to get whatever it is. But if you know, if you're the only one there and you jump into a bunch of inmates for that cell phone, you're going to put your life at risk. You know, it's always good to have that plan. I've seen officers that were great that saw a phone but didn't acknowledge it and came back with a team. So the inmates had no idea what hit him. It's like, oh, I saw a phone. He didn't do that. He walked right by as if he didn't see nothing. And that's how he caught most of his phones. He'd be doing his tours and you wouldn't know if he saw it or not. And the next thing you know, a team would be coming in 10 minutes later and, you know, ripping that room apart. So again, you know, that de-escalation, the retraining, and again, de-escalation only if, like Russ said and Dave said, if you can. But that does, you have to make that effort if time allows it. But if it doesn't, obviously there is no de-escalation. Do what you can, protect yourself. But be mindful, the use of force training, stuff like that, it should be a last resort. And that's also your safety as well. That's what we're trying to get at. Outside of use of force, we could have facilities that are just known for having tons of contraband. And I hate that right now because during COVID times when, you know, there's not a lot of traffic coming in from the outside and you still have a spike in contraband, it's hard not to look at the people that work in the facility, you know, because you're not having traffic, you're not having visitors, you're not having volunteers, you're just having the daily runnings, and yet you still have contraband. Well, now that's a concern. So one of the measures, obviously there's going to be many measures here, but one of the measures that I think that need to be put in place at this point, and this is going to be a great discussion right here, is that the facility is a controlled environment, right? So even for staff, unless there's an emergent reason or they got a permission from a supervisor, they shouldn't really be touring the facility, not outside of supervisors. Supervisors are different. But like if I'm an officer and I'm going on break, I shouldn't be breaking in another unit to go hang out with my buddy. One thing is my buddy's got to run a unit. So my buddy doesn't have time to be chatting with me. Second thing is that's not the designated break area. You know, you have a lot of officers sometimes that like to go walk in a unit and talk to the inmates, but that's not your unit. And then they'll probably tell the officer, hey, don't put me in the logbook. I have to put you in the logbook because you came into the unit and I don't want to be held responsible if you do something foolish. And they're going to say, well, can't get him, but I can get you because we have proof that he was in the unit and you didn't write him in. That's why a lot of facilities, what they do, especially if you have a facility that has that contraband concern, one of the things they do is they kind of, you know, if you have to go visit another area, you need a supervisor's permission. And that supervisor needs to know why you need to go there. And then they'll even call the officer and let the officer know such and such is going up to your area. Then when you put that in the book, you know, the receiving officer, I'm putting you in the book per supervisor such and such. So if you do have a corrupt officer that's maybe going up there to get some contraband or get a little friendly to a female inmate or a male inmate, whatever it is, how many times are they going to go up to that supervisor and ask them, got to go back there again today? Why? You went there yesterday. Why do you go back there today? You know, why do you got to go back there another day? So I think having that supervisor permission, having that level of accountability does, you know, kind of have some level of protection if you have that one rogue officer who is, you know, giving out contraband or getting a little too friendly with the inmate. But I don't know if that's how it works everywhere, Dave. I mean, how do you guys operate? Does that make sense to you?
A lot of our nights, I've been working nights here lately. A lot of our nights we've had to have officers from other units go around and help count. But as far as just going in there and hanging out, I discourage it. I discourage it every chance I get because if you're hanging out and talking to your buddy, you're not running your unit. You're not watching your inmates. So, yeah, I'm not a fan of it. I don't, but I also teach my people don't search by yourself. So we have people from other unit coming over to assist you in a search. Make sure you don't get in over your head. But there again, you're doing your job. You're not going and hanging out. And I don't think there's a place for it in the workplace. I really don't. Just going in there and hanging out in somebody else's unit, I don't think there's a place for it because it distracts you from the job, distracts you from doing what you have to do.
Right, and as you mentioned, you're saying job function. So obviously, when they go there, there's going to be supervisor's approval. Russ? What's your thoughts? So again, you have a facility right now that maybe has a contraband issue. I mean, or maybe just some over involvement with inmates. Whatever the history is, I don't know. But the point is that to kind of keep some level of accountability. I mean, Russ, if someone came into your unit, you're a unit officer, and just started, went right past you and started talking to all the inmates, what would be your approach? Would you document that person in the logbook, or what would you do?
Well, first, it would be a little bit hard for me from the units I've worked in and stuff to kind of see that. The last institution I was at, we had a 1/3 mile track. So someone can't just really go wandering out of their way unless they're supposed to go wandering out of their way. One of the later, ones that I ran is I had one where I had to go to different units to interview inmates and things like that. So I think it's really more of a thing of you telling people, not to leave the unit, because for them to actually go to another unit would have been problematic. And some of the more close confines and stuff that I've been, the next unit is, 20, 30 feet away, and you might step in there because you have to do some paperwork or something. So I think it's more of just telling people, don't leave your unit rather than don't go to another unit, because sometimes they would, just come up to the front, or, maybe have to go over to culinary or something. On the other hand, I have known of a few occasions where things were problematic. We had one particular female officer that was assigned to a unit, but she wasn't assigned to a building. We had 5 buildings on that. And a guy that was under investigation, we had locked up inside SEG, and all of a sudden she kept going into SEG. And so she was definitely not out of bounds in the unit, but out of bounds in the building. And so when a week later, when he was finally paroled, they were waiting for her to pick him up, which they did. So, I mean, it is a factor. I think it's just going to be a different factor, though, for each and every place.
Right. And I just want to add, when you have that level of accountability, right, when you have, again, maybe the supervisor permission, but it has to be job oriented, obviously. It also is going to lessen on the allegations. I mean, that's another thing, in an effort to, I may be limiting some of the movements you're in a prison, guys. I mean, it is what it is. But think about it. You're not putting yourself in a situation where an inmate can say you're harassing them or doing something foolish. So I think that is a good tool that can be utilized to, again, remember, we're talking about higher level management here looking down, but to hold people accountable. Because think about this, guys. You don't have those cameras in play that have audio. And let's say you do have an issue between an officer and an inmate. And let's say, the officer, again, one of the rare officers are saying something foolish. We have bad apples, unfortunately, but they don't define us. But hear me out. I may not be able to prove what you said, and this may be a problem right now between, every inmate you seem to interact with. They all have these concerns. And so I may not be able to prove what you said, but I got policy that says you're out of bounds. So I don't have to really prove what you said to now focus on the policy now that says you shouldn't have been in that unit because you did not have the supervisor's permission. Would you think that method, Dave, would limit, and again, nothing could totally eliminate, but would limit the spread of contraband?
It couldn't do anything to hurt limiting the spread of contraband. Definitely. I really can't expound on it any further than you did. I think it would help.
Yeah, and then Russ, what about undue relationships with inmates?
Yeah, you have to be careful. I know whenever anyone hears that term relationship thrown out there, they're automatically, thinking toward that sexual component. It doesn't have to be anything even about that. If you're more than any kind of friendly with an inmate, you're probably in a position where you can be compromised on some sort of security. I mean, it's not necessarily something earth shattering or crime of the century, but it could be something where you turn your back or you let them get away with a little bit too much. So that would definitely interfere with any kind of untoward relationship. I think with regards to going at it as far as contraband's really more of you can slow things down to a degree. Stopping it through that method, probably not. Someone's always going to be willing to go to SEG with a buttload of goodies or whatever, but every extra hoop you can make them jump through is a good idea.
Yeah, and guys, before we wrap this up, because we're going to probably have to have another episode because there's more, a whole mess of more areas, including implementation of policies and procedures. But before we go, I also want to mention one more thing, and this really deals with the supervisors. You have to enforce their tours. I mean, that's key. I mean, inmates should expect a supervisor to come on that unit at least twice. I'm not going to say the specific time, but at least the sergeant maybe twice, the lieutenant maybe once. But you need that. You need the supervisors there because hopefully when they're there, they maintain some level of integrity, but they're also there to answer some complaints if there are any. And the tours that the supervisors make, one of them should be a cell-by-cell tour, literally, at least for the frontline supervisor. But one of them should be a cell-by-cell tour to kind of see each of the inmates to see if there is any complaints. Now, even when there's a complaint against custody, and you're that higher level management, you have to make sure that when that complaint is investigated, that you eliminate all conflict. Now, some places will allow another level of custody to look at it as long as it's a level higher. So if I have a problem with an officer, I can get a sergeant because the supervisor should be trusted to do that. That's their job. If it's a sergeant, I can get a lieutenant. If it's a lieutenant, captains and whatever. But in some cases, they may not want to go that route. That may be something, I'm going to give strictly to the investigative division, depending on the severity of the claim. But with that said, the trust in the supervisors to be professional and do their job and then also be held accountable. Like if I see that there's an officer that's on third shift that's not doing their job and not touring, and I'm watching on the camera and I notice that this has happened for quite some time, the supervisor is going to get hit too. The supervisor is going to get hit because I'm trusting the supervisor to make sure that the staff is doing their job, which are those spontaneous tours. And as much as we hate it, we hate that supervisor that sneaks up on you. In some cases, it may be needed because, you got a job to do. And as a supervisor, I'm connected to you. I'm responsible for you. So the last thing I want is for you not to tour. And then when I go in, you're telling me everything's okay, but you haven't toured all night. And now I got an inmate that died. You haven't toured, and now I'm screwed. I'm screwed because I trusted you, but technically what I need to do is to do what I can to keep you on your toes and make sure you're doing your rounds because we're supposed to be helping each other, and I could see, as I moved up, why that, is something that has to be reinforced with the supervisors because a lot of us in higher management really do rely on those frontline supervisors to maintain the integrity of the job. That's why it's zero tolerance when a supervisor makes a bad choice, negligent or criminal. It's zero tolerance because frontline, you're in a trusted position. Supervisor, higher level of trust. You're ensuring that we can trust that front line. When you have an excessive use of force and you're a supervisor and you're leading a team and you do nothing to stop it, you're going to be held at a higher level of accountability. Because even if you didn't touch the inmate, it doesn't matter. because you sat and watched it knowing that you had the power to stop it through your authority. So, hey, Dave, what's your position on how we hold those supervisors responsible?
Holding a supervisor responsible for making a tour is vital. We actually have it written in policy how many times certain people are supposed to make a tour around our units. And you mentioned PREA earlier. According to PREA guidelines, as a captain, I have to make a tour around every unit, cell to cell, once a shift. It's important. And I honestly think it has a trickle-down effect. If I let my staff know it's important to me, then it becomes important to them. And I have to be willing to inspect what I expect and go in there and make sure they're actually doing it to make sure we're all on the same page.
You know, I love what you said. Someone very wise told me, people sometimes don't do what you expect. They do what you inspect. And I hate to think of it that way, but, you know, especially if you're the higher level management and you're also now held for that responsibility on the highest level. So like Dave said, it trickles down. You're going to hold me responsible? Well, who's giving me my information? My captain. Well, Cap, you're going to be held responsible. What's the captain going to say? Well, who's giving me my information? The lieutenant. And whatever the rank structure is from there. Hey, Russ, what's your thoughts on supervisors being responsible?
I think that absolutely they need to be responsible. And I think it's incumbent upon their bosses, though, to make what they're responsible for within the realm of possibility. You know, I when we start talking about rounds and stuff like that, you know, I remember we got rid of a sergeant spot on a yard where we had a unit sergeant and we had a yard sergeant. And if you were going to visit each cell, you would be visiting 400 cells, right? And then on top of that, you know, you're expected to do 3 disciplinaries and get all of those people fed and, you know, post the gun in the chow hall. So I think that, you know, if you're going to expect people to do their tours, if you're going to expect them to, you know, go to each cell, you ought to have a division of labor that allows for that. So, you know, I would always want people to, you know, make sure that doing that, you know, for doing it for one shift, probably not a big deal. Trying to do it every shift where you're constantly deciding that you're going to peg that manpower down and you're going to take away supervisors and you're going to take away officers and you're going to take away maybe even that sergeant's supervisor, maybe his lieutenant isn't going to be there 3 nights a week now. So, you know, let's have a division of labor that makes sense and expect the worst to happen if you don't account for that. So if we want to talk about accountability, it's got to be up the ladder as well as down the ladder.
Yeah, and I love that. And guys, when you know that job is not possible, document it and let your supervisor know, because that documentation is going to hold them responsible. Like, I can't do all these tours tonight, you know, not in one night. I can't do intake and suicide watches at the same time. Some of the jails, crazy. So I love what Russ said, within the realm of possibility. You know, sometimes higher levels, they don't realize they cut positions, and it's because they see the number, but they don't see how it's applied until you get that one sergeant or whoever that officer, whatever it is, just scrambling. So again, if you're management, you know, getting to know those positions coming in, and if you have to make moves, don't cut anybody until you kind of know who's going to be affected by that. Bring them to the table and say, hey, listen, I was thinking of cutting this post. How will this affect your job? Because especially you're at a point now where you're trying to fix that reputation. You need presence, but you need people to kind of not rush through it either. You know, I love what Russ said. It's not about rushing through it. It's about, you know, like Dave said, yeah, I got to go cell by cell, but I don't want to be looking at the clock saying, man, I got to get this done because I got to get this and get this. This person's just going through the motions. They're not checking anything. They're more concerned about, you know, finish the 12 other jobs they have at that moment. So you're right. We're going to push on the supervisors to be effective, but we also have to give them the means and the tools to be effective. But again, very big part of safety and security and maintaining that reputation is starting with those supervisors and making sure that whatever it is that you're trying to pass down the pike is being done, and then the supervisors maintain it. They don't allow the staff to, again, if they have the means, you know, they don't allow the staff to kind of slowly become complacent and then venture off. You know, the hardest thing about corrections, guys, is really, I know a lot of people say it's about implementing something new, and sometimes that's not as hard as maintaining it and keeping people away from going back to what they're comfortable to. So sometimes you could be aggressive in implementing something, but you still have those supervisors that need to be on top to make sure that we continue that day after day after day until that becomes a routine, until that becomes a habit. Because eventually, the moment you stop, those supervisors stop, frontline may start to kind of fall back into whatever their old habits are. Now, guys, I thought this was a great dialogue. Again, it's not always a perspective that we want to put out there, but that's why I wanted to have Russ on and Dave on, because I wanted people to know, if you notice how this discussion went, we gave it out balanced. You know, management needs this, but management better do this. And there was a key to that. There's a reason why we did that. It's also a reason why I had Russ and Dave on. You know, we need this done, but obviously management has a level of responsibility too. So, you know, you can't go in and expect without knowing that you have to give something in return. I felt that this was a very good dialogue that took into account both perspectives. A manager coming in that has to clean the reputation of a facility, that has to, you know, make sure that we get rid of the cancer, but in the process, make sure that I'm not killing my new officers, or I'm sorry, my good officers, the officers that are effective, the staff that want to do their job. And I think that's the balanced approach. And hopefully we were able to get that off. I hope, you know, because that's the key. I don't want people to think that we're anti-officer here. But again, I specifically said the small amount that a rogue can sometimes be the cause of that negative label. So in order for us to kind of regain that pride in what we do, what do we have to do? We have to get rid of that rogue. We have to get rid of the staff that destroy our image. Hey, Dave, anything you'd like to say in closing?
What I want to say in closing is targeted more towards the good staff. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep your nose to the grind. Keep doing what you're doing. You are appreciated. Everybody sees it. It might not feel like it at the time, but keep doing what you're doing. We love you. We need you.
I love it. And Russ, anything you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, I think, you know, I want to, you know, talk to those line staff and those line supervisors at the same time. You know, you can be saddled with a really bad situation depending on who your immediate supervisors and or admin are that are directly above you. But that doesn't have to be the be all end all of your existence. It is possible to lead from the bottom. It is possible to instill a culture change from the bottom to the top. I'm not going to tell you that it's easy, but it can be done. So if you're willing to, you know, even if you're just that lowly officer and you're willing to lead people and you're willing to instill professionalism, people will follow you. And those people that will follow you will affect all of those around you. And before long, you can see a difference. You can see a difference in your supervisors who want to be worthy to lead people like you. That's all I got to say.
I love that. And guys, there's other things we could discuss probably in a future episode, you know, reviewing the audits of the past, you know, getting an understanding of the history, just kind of, you know, really just getting an understanding of what you're stepping into, but also leaving yourself open to what can, you know, what can come your way. I mean, you can't get stuck in such a fixed plan that you're not open to, you know, reality. You know, sometimes we come up with these plans in our head and we do whatever we can to try to get that plan into action. But unfortunately, the environment's not going to allow it. And that's when we start making bad choices. We start cutting corners without realizing and maybe stepping back and saying, you know what, this plan's just not a good fit here. We have to go back to the drawing board. Yeah, again, guys, I thought it was a great dialogue. Thank you guys for coming on. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Inmate manipulation. It's available, guys. It's in the link in the description. Don't forget Correction Officer Lifestyle YouTube channel. Great channel by David Smith. And Russ got Keepers of Chaos on Facebook. So don't forget to check it out, guys. Stay safe.